All right. With the highest production quality. Uh, Coming up, um, I'm going to be repeating that leverage feels uh, very different than owning something one to one. It has a different effect on a person's view of what they own, and um, especially if it goes bad, but as well as if it goes good. Uh, Leverage shouldn't have a feeling, as it's just uh, numbers and money, but we associate uh, numbers and money with feeling based on whether or not, depending on, um, we have more or less value during the time that we are levered, and it creates a pit in your stomach if you are losing money rapidly, and it creates a very hot, airy head when you are making money rapidly. But in the long term, having a levered position and an asset that typically appreciates over time feels very good. Um, People tend to do this with a home, and the benefit of having a home and selling it 10, 20 years. I know this says 0 and this says 5, but if you pretend that this curve is 20 years, you basically get to ignore this portion where you weren't sure what your home was worth. You're not checking every day, you know. You could be underwater on your mortgage for a period where the value of your mortgage is more than the total value of your home. But I believe that's what the term underwater means. But um, the thing that you're paying for at some point could be worth less than what you agreed upon the price to be. But at the end of the journey for a home, let's say you do this for 20 years before you change homes or something like that, you it just feels like this completely linear path from what I paid for it to what it is worth in the current day. And it simply isn't, but it feels like that because if you're not checking the price frequently, all of a sudden you feel like you just made a bunch of money. So if you buy something, right, and you agree to pay $25,000 in exchange for control of something that has a total price tag of $100,000, and then you hold on to that thing for 5 years, that is a 40% appreciation of $100,000. Your It is not appreciation on the $25,000 you put in. Now, if you were to sell the asset if you were to sell the asset that was worth $100,000 without putting up any additional money, you would only profit 40% on $250,000 or $2,500, right? But in the real world, right? Um, the interesting thing is that usually people attempt to pay off uh, the asset that they want to control using leverage, and 40% appreciation on $100,000. So what you put up at the onset is $40,000, and a return of $40,000 for an initial investment of $25,000 is a total of 160% return. Um, of course, for this asset that we're talking about where we're doing this, it is very, very likely that after uh, a person puts in a $25,000 down payment that they are making interest payments or interest and principal payments on the asset, on the underlying agreed upon exchange towards the $100,000. But if they hadn't, then a 40% return on $25,000, if they uh, were to resell it without putting in any additional capital, then they still would have profited disproportionately, and it would be very nice. The issue comes in for most and many if they are checking the price that a group of people deem as fair for the asset that they've purchased, and it is below the price that they agreed upon, they freak out. In that year one of the 5-year example with a $100,000 asset, if someone were to check the value of that asset, then they would have a pit feeling in their stomach because they realize something that everyone else knew but don't intuitively feel, right? And that is that if you purchase an initial asset for $100,000 and you down payment $25,000, in the first year, the asset has lost 20% of its price that people agree that is fair. You incur the losses of the total price and not what you paid. So a 20% loss of $100,000 is $20,000. You would negatively return $20,000 on the capital that you provided, because either A, you don't completely own the asset, or B, the person who you borrowed money from or the leverage from still wants their payment regardless. They do not care that you lost money on the transaction. As long as they're getting their payments on schedule, they're fine. So you've actually incurred the loss of $20,000. And this thing that you purchased that is now worth $75,000, only $5,000 of that's yours. And if you put in no further money, you would have an unrealized, if you didn't sell, negative 80% return on whatever your initial investment was. And that it just feels worse than this, where you luck out, you just hit the home run, and you make a good chunk because you're controlling a larger chunk. That it feels better to make this money than it does to lose this money. And I would even argue that this feels worse. It's scary. It creates a situation where people feel uncertain about their own future. They start second guessing their decision making and things like that. I believe that people try to make the best decision they have with all the information they have present when buying or selling an item. And regardless of the outcome, a person should have looked at the quality of the decision to make a purchase or sale of an item rather than the outcome in the short term, and focus on what the long-term outcome of that decision was, even if it's just you paid for a learning experience and it was very expensive. I don't think fools make mistakes. I think fools make mistakes 10 times and they're all the same mistake. So I think that if this ever happens to anyone that is listening to this, and you lose 80% on an initial investment, um, the next thing to look at is probably what's your time horizon, right? Because this graph essentially says that the longer you have to maintain control of whatever you purchase, if that thing tends to grow in value, that you could just not do anything or make your interest and principal payments and be fine. If you don't have a very long time, you will very likely incur a loss, and that is a terrible shame, and it will feel bad. But if you do have the time to wait, then go ahead and do that. Just hang on. You know, um, if I am going long, which means I'm uh, taking a position of uh, interest in an underlying asset, uh, if I would like to potentially own something in the future, or if I would like to own that thing now and have that object's increase in value have a positive increase on my net worth, then I'm going to give that thing as much time as I possibly can. Because if I think I've identified an opportunity where an asset will increase in the future greater than inflation and similar returns that I could have made elsewhere with a similar risk profile. So that is to say, if I don't think that I'll feel like I lost out, or if I don't think if I do this, it's a 1 in 100 shot that it works, I would like to give that thing as much time as possible. Relative to the portfolio strategy, um, if you would like to go infinitely long on something, you can just buy shares and they never expire. And they are claims to that company's current and future cash flows proportional to the amount of shares held by you against what everyone else owns in the company. And that's wonderful. Shares will be around as long as the company's around, and that is phenomenal. Um, great companies will buy back their own shares and increase your value and your ownership percentage in their company, and it will meaningfully concentrate their future earnings into your pocket. On the other hand, options have leverage, and whatever the returns are, those are applied to a multiple and then displayed to you. Now that we're in the digital era of asset trading, the returns of any underlying are displayed to you with a multiple applied because you are levered, and it is such a fascinating thing. And the issue with shares is that there is no leverage. There is a one-to-one correlation. The benefit to shares is that they never expire. You have as long to be right as you need. It could be year 7, it could be year 15, and whenever your outperformance happens, you were there for it. And with options contracts, they do have an expiration date. So it would behoove you to pick options contracts that uh, are either relatively liquid or um, provide meaningful value, because when and it will happen if you buy enough options for a long enough time, uh, when the doorbell rings and you must either um, fork up enough capital to purchase shares at a price that is unfavorable, or sell your contract back to the market at a worthless price or next to worthless price, you must do that. Uh, because brokerages tend not to assign in 2024, brokerages tend not to assign long positions to accounts anymore. They tend to liquidate the position and give you the uh, difference of return. Um, that being said, when the portfolio that we're talking about here, which is mine with more videos and explanations upcoming, I'm going to take the furthest dated calls that I possibly can. Calls like the example on the screen that are 106 days out, approaching 1,000 days. Quick math in my head tells me that that's close to 3 years from now. Those calls are really only available for purchase on underlyings that are incredibly liquid, which means that many people are looking at the calls. There is a downside to this in that the calls that I have interest in, the market's very small. I have purchased calls like this, and when I would look at the open interest after placing my order, it was 1, which means I am the only buyer in the entire market. And so I have to, pay something that many would consider unreasonable for the control of the asset, because I have to purchase from a market maker instead of a buyer on the other, or a seller on the other side that is either moving these derivatives in blocks, or someone who for some reason would want to sell a very deep in the money position, maybe as a loan to themselves. But when you purchase something like this, you have more than 8 quarters to benefit from the growth of the company, which stock exists as the underlying of the option. Now, that is to say that you have to believe that if you purchase one of these, as I do, when I purchase one of these, my primary thing, and this does involve an incredible amount of risk, and it's something that everyone would advise you not to do. But I believe that if you're very careful, smart, and calculated, and willing to accept that this is a large risk, right, you can identify a company that has the chance to grow its future cash flows over the next several quarters. And this does mean that cash flows could meaningfully shrink for maybe even 3 of those quarters, but if they grow all the rest, compounding has this magical effect where the losses are overtaken by the growth of the company's income. Is it advisable? No, no. I wouldn't tell essentially anyone to do this. If someone were to tell me that they were doing this, um, I would go based on individual by individual, because the real issue with a call like this is that if you buy this on Visa, okay, that's fine. Who cares, right? It almost doesn't matter the underlying. What matters is the graph right here, where some people may feel very smart for a short period of time and then get incredibly fearful and nervous because they actually have started to lose money. And then as the company's cash flows grows, they feel very smart again. And then the assets that I'm controlling through a derivative, they're depreciating and I should sell. And it's this mental story of money that investors tell themselves, uh, because the three-legged stool that is an options contract of how much buy when for what price is three focus problems are incredibly difficult for many people to wrap their minds around, including me. I'm not saying I'm special in any way with this. Triple focus problems are the most difficult situations that most people find themselves in. Uh, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't, fucked if you don't do anything at all. You know, so it's the only guaranteed choice is that you will either make a decision or make the decision not to make a decision, and uh, that's rough, especially for three focus problems. But why does it feel like this? You know, um, I think a lot of the issues with calls and things like that is that people are not properly giving them the correct weight in their portfolio, and they massively overdo it relative to their portfolio size. That's a completely different story, but you know, I believe that's the end of the. Is that the end? I think my computer's frozen. No, it's just the end. Wonderful. Um, but yeah, this is a short story, right? But uh, I mentioned in an earlier thing that most people could probably do this, but what many people lack is the stomach to sit around and sit on your hands and do absolutely nothing. Do absolutely nothing, uh, because this year one feels terrible, and that's really that's it. Thanks for stopping by.